As we continue our discussion on the basics of spiritual leadership, which we've defined as servant leadership, today I'd like to talk about the second most common shortcoming of leaders, and that is that we forget to follow. We've said our first most basic failure is that we forget to lead. The second one is we forget to follow. So today's challenge is don't forget to follow. The point here is that every person of authority is a person under authority, and ultimately we're under the authority of Jesus Christ. There is no such thing as being in ministry or being a spiritual leader independently of being in authority to someone else. We can be independent in terms of maturity, but we have to be in submission and under authority somewhere. And if your vision is not part of God's dream and God's vision, to see the whole earth filled with the glory of God and people from every tribe and every tongue and every nation around the throne of God, if you're not working for church unity and world missions, if you're not reaching out to the poor and needy as Jesus instructed us to, if it's not part of God's dream, then you need to reconsider what you are doing. So every one of us in authority is a person under authority. And apart from that, the Bible challenges us to be in submission at various levels. It says that slaves should be in submission to their masters, or in modern days, that employees should be in submission to their employer. Children should be in submission to parents. Wives should submit to their husbands, and husbands should love their wives as Christ loves the church. So there are various levels of submission, and if you don't fit into any one of those categories, the Bible also challenges us to be in submission to one another. So we are to be in mutual submission. But in terms of leadership, whatever the vision we are moving forward, we have to make sure that that is part of a bigger vision that we are following. Now, there are three scriptures that I'd like to refer to today, two of them in terms of our submission to leadership. Romans 13, verse 1 says, "Let every soul be subject to the governing authority, for there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God." Let every soul be in submission to the authorities. Then Hebrews 13, verse 17, "Obey those who rule over you, and be submissive, for they watch out for your souls, and those who must give account. Let them do so with joy and not with grief, for that would be unprofitable for you." In other words, we are to be in submission to the authorities over us, and we need to submit to them so that they can do their jobs well. Although Romans 13, verse 17 uses both obey and submit, it says obey the authorities over you and be submissive. It helped me very much to understand that obedience and submission are different. Although they're linked, they go together, they go hand in hand. They are two different things. Obedience is an action, and submission is an attitude. The word for submit or being submissive is the Greek word hupo, H-U-P-O, which means to put yourself under, to willingly make yourself subordinate to someone else. It's an attitude of the heart. So if we are going to obey the leaders over us and be submissive to them, we have to obey them with the right attitude. You can obey your leader, your boss, your superior. You can obey them to the T, but if you're doing it with the wrong attitude, you're not in submission. You're out of submission. You can obey God with grit teeth. You can do exactly what God told you to do, but if you're doing it with the wrong attitude, you're not in submission. Now, the whole issue here is that being in submission is being under protection. We submit for the sake of authority, but we also submit for the sake of protection. We're in submission to authorities over us. Those of us have authority or under authority, but we also do that for the sake of protection. It's like having an umbrella over you. The more umbrellas you have over you, the more protected you are. As soon as you have the wrong attitude, you step outside of that umbrella. And if you step outside of the umbrella, you're going to get rained on. You're going to get hurt. You're going to be an open target for the enemy. And that's important for us to understand. We have to obey with the right attitude in order to be in submission. In 1 Samuel 15, verse 23, there's a very harsh scripture. It's when Saul is losing his kingship and his kingdom. And this is what it says, 1 Samuel 15, verse 23. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. Then it says, because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has also rejected you from being king. Now, obviously, there's other issues there in terms of Saul's disobedience and being dethroned from being the king. But just that verse, that rebellion is as witchcraft. It doesn't say rebellion is witchcraft, but it has the same effect. When you get involved in witchcraft or the occult, and you dabble in the occult, you open yourself up to forces of darkness and to evil things. The same thing happens when you are in rebellion or when you have obeying with the wrong attitude. So let me challenge you to make sure that you are in obedience to the authorities over you, but that you are submitting to them with the right attitude. You're obeying them with the right attitude. So we've seen that it's possible for us to obey with a wrong attitude. Now that simply is called rebellion, and rebellion has incredible implications in terms of opening ourselves up to deception and the forces of darkness. So it's possible to obey with a wrong attitude. The other question is it possible to disobey but have the right attitude? Now, more about that next time as I talk about what do you do when you disagree with the authorities over you? How can you remain in submission and under God's protection? As we conclude for today, let me challenge you and encourage you. Don't forget to follow. In other words, remember to be in submission. God bless you. Here are a few questions with regards to submission being an attitude for you to consider. Number 1, do you agree with the statement? Obedience is an action, submission is an attitude. Number 2, can you think of times you obeyed a superior but with the wrong attitude? Number 3, can you think of times when you obeyed God but with the wrong attitude? And what is that called? Number 4, if so, how do you think God felt about it?